Hey everybody, welcome back to Northernlion Plays the Binding of Isaac Afterbirth Plus. One win in a row. It's a truly landmark era. Incredible performance recently. Okay, what do we got here? 2 of diamonds. You know, doesn't really do too much for us right now, but in the future, 4-1 VA, 2 CSH. Stats. Dude, this room is actually the worst room. I bet if you looked at it, and you structured it based on floor, I'd probably take more damage on that room than 95% of first floor room permutations. If you can't shoot through the stonies, like, or burn through the ditches, or slam in the back of my Dragula, you got no chance there. So the run is okay to start with. The HP is huge. The crystal ball is huge. Thank God we got analog stick, which actually allows us to have an okay rate of fire. And all the other stats are just kind of like there. They're not bad. They're not great. They just sort of exist. And that's okay too. Just want to make sure, like, if I could just get to the first item room, I think I could transition to an anecdotal model from whence to speak. But instead, every room's taking us just a little bit longer than I'd like here, so I want to focus, because you never know. This room, on the contrary to that earlier room, is not nearly as bad. 100% due to the fact that the enemies you're fighting stay in the same freaking place. That's easy money. And boy, do I have anecdotes for you. I like to... Let's find the item room before we fight the boss, but... You know, one of the things I remember I read on the internet, you know, it must be 15 years ago, but it gets repeated all the time, that had an impact on me, was the idea that, you know, when you're young, and you look up to your parents, if you're lucky enough to have, you know, good examples, or at least effective examples of adults in your life when you're getting older, you know, you always think that adults have things totally figured out, right? Like, whenever I had a problem, as a kid, as a teenager, even as a young adult, you know, in my early 20s, I was like, you know, how do I pay my bills? And my mom's like, you just do it. And I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way. But I read online, you know, a long time ago, again, like a decade and a half ago, that, you know, when adults, they don't have things figured out. They're just making it up as they go along, you know, and that's not to say that, like, they're performing a great charade, but, you know, you never know how to deal with something until you actually deal with it. You know, it's not like you just hit age, you know, 20 or age 25 or age 30 and all of a sudden you're like, I know everything about compound interest. You know, it happens over time as you deal with it. But anyway, so now I am one of those adults who's figuring it out day by day. For the first time in my entire life, my car got towed. I'm recording this on Sunday. My car got towed on Friday. We had a meeting at the bank, and we parked out. We were late, I'll admit. I'm not going to go into the minutiae of that, but you know I'm an early person, so you can guess how I was feeling at that time. A little stressed, a little rushed. I parked on the street. I looked at the sign, and in my frazzled circumstances, I looked at the sign, and I thought the sign said, "You're good after this time." What the sign actually said is, you're bad after this time. So our meeting went on long, and then the guy we were meeting with was like, hey, did you park around back? And I was like, nah, I just parked out front. There was a spot. And he was like, oh, dude, your car definitely got towed. And I was like, no, you don't know what you're talking about, mister. And then we go out, and there's our car's not there. So yeah, we had to... I mean, at the end of the day, it was a hassle. But it's not that big of a deal. And now I got, you know, another... adult experience under my belt. I know what happens if your car gets towed. You call the city of Vancouver impound lot, you read out your license plate, and they go, yeah, you got it. Or they go, yeah, we got it. I don't know, you shouldn't have it. It is weird, though, to just walk outside and be like, hey, my possession is no longer there. So we got a parking ticket, which is fine. And it wasn't like I didn't park it illegally, and I feel the need to defend myself here. I didn't park it illegally in front of a fire hydrant or like a hospital area, a handicap spot or something like that. I parked it in an area where it's like, hey, after the early afternoon, you got to abandon this spot because the road gets busy. So I understand why I was towed, but at the same time, it's not like we were trying to hook up the water main to save that burning building, and I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm just... Look, they're already putting me away for life, okay? I shouldn't even joke about that, because I feel like a lot of people don't understand that that would be a joke. They're like, ooh, I didn't know in Canada they could give you the death penalty for parking in a no parking zone. Anyway, we walked to the impound lot. It was a nice walk, and by nice I mean terrible, because it snowed in Vancouver recently. And it's not, the snow doesn't bother me. Walking on snow, you know, I would rather not walk on snow, but it's not the end of the world. But as is the case in this city, it snowed, and then it rained, and then it snowed, and then it rained, and that's when we were walking. So it was just like pure slush. But, you know, we went there, and it was easy enough. One thing that's interesting is, you know, I love to, you know, talk about Google reviews. Like, reviews of establishments are hilarious to me. So the towing company that towed us, they don't have good reviews on Google. And I think you could probably, you know, use your noggin to understand why. Did I really want to do this? Maybe not. You know what? I think we could probably get away with taking this. But I was like, man, they should really... I'm not saying it's Google's fault, by the way, and I'm taking this just because, you know, if we're doing an Isaac a day, let's get zany, bro. But, there should be some establishments that you should... I mean, in my opinion, it's not that you should be unable to review them. Here's the thing. Because I guess at the end of the day, you also have to recognize that, you know, if the reviews for your establishment are bad, but people have no choice but to interface with your business, they're probably going to interface with your business nonetheless. You know, it's not going to impact you too much. It's not like the next time I get a parking ticket, I'm like, oh, don't get towed by them. Hey, if you tow me, make sure you use this towing company instead. They've got a 3-star review. But anyway, all the reviews were like, they treat you like it's jail. I love the idea that now I can see how people feel about places that, I mean, essentially how they feel about them is irrelevant. It is kind of like reviewing a jail. Well, yeah, they fed me a bologna sandwich every day for 16 years. I mean, I guess I shouldn't joke about that. It's a kind of a complicated issue, you know. Are prisoners, you know, where you live, are they commonly... Is the strategy for incarceration to eventually get them to rehabilitation, or is it to punish them for the crimes that they've committed, or does it depend on the crime that they've committed and also, you know, their background and their record to begin with, you know? I watched a documentary on, it was the Inside the World's Hardest Prisons. I think I mentioned this already, but, you know, this guy, and they've had like 6 different hosts, because I guess the first guy couldn't handle the world's hardest prisons, but, you know, he goes, not undercover, but, he goes in as like as an inmate at some of the hardest prisons in the world, like, you know, as like a wood fence around a pit that you can kick other prisoners into. I'm gonna live in here for a week. I'm real scared about our ability to hit enemies here, my man. Anyway, but they did a contrasting episode where they went to that prison in Norway, where it's like maximum security for murderers and, you know, violent crimes and heinous crimes. But the maximum prison sentence in Norway is like 23 years or something like that. So eventually, like, they're gonna get out, assuming they're not gonna die in prison. So you gotta rehabilitate them, or at least you gotta focus on rehabilitation. And to their credit, the recidivism rate was really low. But I thought what was really interesting is that the prisoners have a great deal of dignity in that prison. And I mean that as a good thing. I'm not a criminologist. I don't know, you know, I'm sure, like, if one of these people, you know, affected your family in a way, or yourself in a way, you would be like, I don't want them to have dignity. But I think, you know, what's interesting is when the host is like, you know, so, like, do you have, you know, atonement for your crimes? And then the guys, you know, typically are like, yeah, like, I'm sad I did it, but please stop talking to me as if, like, I'm a criminal. Like, I transported meth across, like, you know, federal lines or something like that. But that doesn't make me, like, an irredeemable human being just because I'm in here for 15 years. You know, I made a mistake, and now I'm learning how to be, like, you know, an oil change technician in here. Anyway, it's just, I don't even have an opinion on it. It's just interesting to think about. Because I think that, you know, the tendency is to be like, that's a good idea. But then the recidivism rate is lower than other prisons, which, you know, is that the point? Probably. But it was still like 40%. So I could definitely still see some people being like, you know, well, almost half of the people that go there are treated much more nicely and at greater expense than, you know, prisoners elsewhere in the world and still go on to reoffend. So, you know, again, it's kind of a complicated issue to get into for a YouTube video about video games, nonetheless. It's just interesting to think about. Dude, like, I don't know. I can at least handle the crowd control here, but we really need some kind of invincibility. And I didn't do anything with our deal with the devil earlier, because I didn't think any of those items were that useful. I thought Crystal Ball was very important, and for once we're actually getting a chance to use it because our map works now, or like we don't have the same curse. I also watched, you know, yesterday was my day off, or our day off, I should say. So Kate and I, you know, we ran some errands, got the stuff for the P.O. box, had a nice lunch. But then we came home and, you know, we were like, what do you want to do, you know? And I was like, I just want to, I've had a really, I don't want to say busy, and I don't even want to say social, but I've had a lot of, like, out-of-the-house activities over the past, like, 2 weeks. So I was like, whatever we do, I just want to stay home. I don't care if we stay home and, you know, play board games. I don't care if we stay home and watch a couple of movies, but I just don't want to leave the house. So we watched, this Korean show on Netflix called Kingdom, which I've seen a lot of other people tweet about. It's not like it's not niche, let's put it that way. It's a, hold on, this is very important. PhD into Gulp. Okay, that's fine. I do think there's options as our next best choice to try to finesse some good stat upgrades from our bosses, hopefully. Anyway, it's a period drama about, you know, like, I don't know, would you call it medieval? Joseon era Korea? But also there's a supernatural element of kind of like zombies going on in it. And I will say, if you're the kind of person, and I sort of am, who's like, I'm sick of zombies, then, you know, I feel you, brother, and you will probably feel that fatigue here, because, you know, they do a good job, and this is not spoilers, by the way, this is just literally like the elevator pitch for the show, but, you know, they do a good job of kind of slow dripping it out, but by, like, the second or third episode, you're like, you know, aim for the head. You know, they're classic, like, they're Romero zombies, but fast, so I guess not Romero zombies. Anyway, I don't get into the zombie taxonomy that much, because I'm an adult, and it's not 2009 anymore, when people were buying, you know, the zombie survival guide. It might still be popular for all I know. Anyway. It's kind of interesting, the juxtaposition of that supernatural element and then, you know, reasonably interesting, you know, political intrigue. It's kind of like a medieval era Korean Game of Thrones with a little bit less, you know, production quality, but still pretty impressive. I thought, you know, I would rank it at like a 6.5. That's not necessarily a glowing endorsement, but for anybody who is, who's already watched it, you can let me know if I'm way off. In your interpretation, at least. What's, if you haven't watched a lot of Korean television, it can be, and I mean, like, you know, you gotta see more than Old Boy. And I know that's not TV, but you get the idea in order to comment here, but you gotta recognize one of the most jarring things is that even in the midst of, like, incredible tension in the show, they play up, like, a certain sort of vaudevillian slapstick at, like, all times. So people will be, like, running from zombies, and then they'll, like, you know, their foot will fall through a board, and they'll be like, whoa! And then, you know, it's like a tonal dissonance that is very strange for somebody who's consumed, you know, like 99.9% Western media over the course of my life. I'm a little bit more used to it because you know, Kate's Korean. She watches some Korean shows. I lived in Korea for a year, so I'm familiar that you'll have, like, a comedy show, and then at one scene, like, you know, an otherwise normal person will just have psychic powers for whatever reason. And they play it up for, like, a joke, and then they never talk about it again. You know, it's just different. it's tropey, you know. Part of media is understanding the tropes so that you don't go like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? You know, did the writers really screw this one up that bad? And you're like, nah, that's just how they make them there. It's just different by Western standards. Anyway, Kingdom, it's okay. By the way, I never say this, the costume work in that show is incredible. The hat game is out of control. You got lunch bag hats, super fedoras. Like, I know it's based on historical attire, but like, man, the hat game on that show is out of control. Please, Lord, beat the odds, grab a deal with the devil, and get me out, or Angel, but it's gotta be great. Get me out of this friggin' nightmare. I have no idea how we win here, short of getting damage or tears right now. I don't want to go through another floor like this is the thing. Please! My God. I've never heard the song go on that long. So we definitely do want damage. And, dude, out of these, we gotta take Brimstone just for interest's sake. You know, this will be strange. So, I mean, that was pretty much my, my day off, for the most part, like, or our day off. Just watch a lot of Netflix, and honestly, it felt great. I mean, it was only a week ago that we were in, you know, the US looking at EDF. It was nice to, and, you know, we've had a bunch of meetings because it's kind of like, you know, 'tis the season. It's nice to just spend some time at home. I feel much more relaxed. Also, like, you know, I've been working out, and I absolutely destroyed my hamstrings on Friday. And then after destroying my hamstrings, we walked for like an hour to get to our car in the impound lot. So I was like, I don't want to move because, you know, every time I move, my butt muscle is like, please just cut me off. Host hat. Well, I know the hamstrings are not the butt muscle. I was doing an exercise that, you know, is called a lunge. Look it up, sweetheart. Targets both of them. It's a multiplanar movement of the lower body. Hello, Tomo. Would you like to enter the room? I will provide you safe asylum, my son. And here's the thing, I try not to be biased about conflict when it comes to my cats. Hello, Tamao. The thing is, I don't know who started it, you know? Maybe Tomo, he takes shots at Ruka when I'm not looking. But whenever they actually fight, I almost have to take Tomo's side. Because, Tomo is, don't take us the wrong way, buddy, but Tomo's weaker. He's a less skilled combatant. So Ruka, you know, every time I see them fighting, Ruka's like on top of him and just like feeding him the right left. You want to leave now? You want to go? What is it, man? I thought you wanted to stay. Anyway. So I'll provide Tomo asylum, but I don't know, maybe I'm providing him asylum after he was being kind of a joker, you know what I mean? And you know what, it actually reminded me of something I wanted to talk about. You know, sometimes you ever get in trouble in, like, elementary school, and then you'd be like, he started it, and your teacher would be like, I don't care who started it? Was there, like, a school of educational discipline where this was conventional wisdom for, like, 50 years? What do you mean it doesn't matter who started it? It totally matters who started it. In my opinion, at least. I get the idea that, like, you know, well, in a perfect world, we shouldn't use our fists, we should use our words. But, like, simultaneously, if a dude comes at you and punches you in the face, and then you punch him in the face, you're not equally culpable for the situation. The person who threw the fist unprompted right off the get-go is obviously the person more in the wrong. You know, I'm not trying to, if you're a parent of 2 or more children, I understand the effectiveness of this. It's basically like, it's a deterrent, right? If you say, I don't care who started it, it means you're basically sending a message that, you know, if y'all fight, there's gonna be problems. Let's gulp it, dude. So you're trying to put a dampening effect on fighting to begin with. But, like, from a disciplinary standpoint, who started it matters a great deal. I think it has, like, legal precedent, too. You know, like, if somebody comes over and, you know, punches you in the face, and then you punch them in the face, and you go in front of, like, the court, isn't the court gonna be like, well, the second person was obviously acting in self-defense? I think you're sending a bad message that pardon me, I had a little bit of a breakfast burp there. That who started it is irrelevant. I think who started it is, like, it's the most relevant part. Now, if somebody was like, you're a jerk, and then you're like, I'm not a jerk, and you break their leg, okay, you're in the wrong. You know, that's why context matters. But if you respond to a slight with an equal or lesser slight, or not even slight, but action, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you got the moral high ground. I'll even, you know, there's a very famous Northernlion anecdote where, you know, I was sick from school like a day earlier, and then there was another classmate of mine, and I was eating my lunch. He was in detention. I was just doing, like, makeup work because I wasn't at school the previous couple of days. And I was done with my lunch, and I was like, hey, Kenny, you want it? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, then go get it. And I threw it in the trash can. And then he was like, ah, and he punched me in the face. And when I went to see the principal, you know, I was like, so what are you going to do to this guy? He punched me in the face, and he's like, I'm not going to do anything because I think you're both in the wrong. In hindsight, at the time, I was like, he punched me. Sure, I was being intellectually mischievous, but he punched me. In hindsight, I'm now like, dude, I mean, the other guy should also be punished. We should recognize, Kenneth, that it's not a good strategy to respond to a bruised ego with violence. That's only going to serve you poorly in real life. I mean, I say this as if he's still 10 years old. He must be 31 at this point. Who knows where he's... I didn't... You know, we didn't talk too much after this. But, where was I going with this? I can't really remember. But specifically, I think I was definitely in the wrong. You know, I antagonized him right off the bat. What he should have done is walk away. But simultaneously, I can understand why I was not punished, but reprimanded as well. Regardless, though, who started it matters a lot, man. I'm a very civil and cowardly human being. You know, we've talked about it on the show more than once over the past few years, but, you know, Rob is like the opposite of me. We have an inverted response, you know? Rob is like, you know, what if you were walking down the street and somebody, like, insulted your wife? Would you go beat him up? And I'm like, nah, dude. I mean, I understand. It's not like I would be happy about the situation. Of course I wouldn't be. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll go walnut. But I just don't think, and that's, you know, I think you have to think about the greater consequences in that situation. Like, what do I get out of, you know, best case scenario, I go over and I beat the dude up, you know? Best case scenario is I end up with, like, a bruised fist, and my wife is like, thank you for defending my honor. But even then, I don't think she would be like that. I think she would be like, why did you go do that? Worst case scenario, you know, somebody gets seriously injured, there's legal consequences. Maybe the person who gets seriously injured is me, you know? And then it's a double whammy. You went outside, your wife got insulted, and you got your face broken in 6 different places. So I'm just gonna be a walk away, and then when I get home to my relatively cushy life, go, ha 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 ha, and just imagine that they're suffering. And if that makes me seem like the bad guy, I think you should think about the context of the situation a little, you know, more in fine-grained detail, let's say. That's my approach to the situation. That being said, so despite knowing that about me, you know, the idea, especially in a scholastic environment, that, like, or even not in a scholastic environment, but just in general, like, you know, if someone's antagonizing you on the regular basis, well, you should never resort to, you know, their level. I don't know. Sometimes I think you gotta. I don't know. See, here's the thing. I talk about, like, you know, what it's like to be a kid, but I haven't been a kid since, like, you know, the year 2002 or something like that. So, I don't know. Maybe the conventional wisdom is different now. Maybe if you read the baby books and the parenting books and stuff like that, they got all sorts of good strategies. Because like I have my own experience plus the way that my parents raised me. My parents raised me based on their own experiences plus the way their parents raised them, blah, blah, blah. You get it? So we're going back like, you know, 1,000 years here. I'm not saying my grandparents are 1,000 years old. I'm just saying, you know, it's wisdom that's been in the percolator for a long time. So who knows? I guess you got to read the books or YouTube video. Yeah, who needs to read books now that we have YouTube videos? Speaking of which, there's a measles outbreak in Vancouver right now. I don't have no comment on it, nor am I keeping my mouth shut out of civility. You know, it's not even close to controversial. Please, if you have children, I beg you to vaccinate them. Not for me. I'm obviously, you know, I'm an incredible physical specimen. 30 years old. I've been working out for like 6 weeks now. I'm in truly incredible shape. I could probably go toe-to-toe with Joe Rogan right now. But the dude whose kid is patient zero for the measles outbreak in Canada was like, yeah, I didn't vaccinate them. Because I was like worried about the consequences of vaccination. And now like people have, well, kids have already died in Vancouver because, you know, they have a compromised immune system and they got hit with the measles. Now, to the dude's credit, he's not going, well, you know, survival of the fittest. Sorry, brother. He's going like, I'm apologetic for it, but what can I do now? They have the measles. And everyone's like, well, if only we knew in the year 2005 that vaccines were, you know, something you could prevent disease with. This all could have been avoided. Anyway, there's a couple, and I recognize how this sounds. But I also recognize that if you're making the counter argument in this case, we can agree to disagree. I don't think you're a terrible person for it necessarily. I think you're making a terrible mistake. But I think that, you know, you veered into conspiracy to the extent that I don't really... I can't walk on eggshells regarding this issue. It's like climate change and anti-vaxxers. I just can't be like, you know, there's two sides to every story. It's dishonest of me to do so. I'm sorry, Jim Carrey, okay? No, you do your research. Go into the bowels of Stauffer Library. Get into the JSTORs. Look at the P-tests. I'm not talking about urine tests. I'm talking about, you know, P-values, I should say. Sorry, it's been a while since I pretended to be scientifically literate. Alright, we will take Pentagram. Dude, this run is very strange. It is not good, but it's not nearly as terrible as it used to be. And an XL floor, oh my god, an XL floor, and we're close to the boss fight. That's merciful. Like, at the end of the day, I'm being very civil about this, and you can't tell me otherwise, I think. I'm cool, you know, whatever... To some extent, at least, whatever your political beliefs are, as long as they're not, you know, truly hateful, mean-spirited, etc., etc., we're probably okay. And, you know, where you stand on a lot of social issues, it also, I don't think, makes us, you know, irredeemable friends, you know? But, like we can't be friends. But there's just a couple of things, you know, in particular that's like, if you're like, well, you know... The jury's out on vaccinations. I'm like, please just either don't have kids for a while or just get them vaccinated would be one of the two. And then the other one is like, well, you know, there's a real debate over climate change. And I'm like, there is, I suppose. And the debate is between about 98% of climatologists and 2% of climatologists who just so happen to be funded by, you know, large petroleum corporations. Those are just the two, and if you agree with, or if you disagree with me on both of those, you know, as long as you treat people with respect on a daily basis, it's not like I think you're a bad person. But I do think you hold some opinions that I find baffling, I suppose. Anyway. We don't need to get it. I don't know. I'm just... You have to understand... Where am I trying to go with this? If you're a little bit younger than me, I think you have to understand that this is something, you know, that we just had... I mean, you probably do. You probably already are aware of this. 99% of people out there, at least. But, you know, we just had the issue sorted. And I know that this opens me up to, like, a sheeple comment. But, you know, we had kind of been educated in this narrative that human intellect is basically like... it's something that society trains. So, you know, we have the opportunity to be smarter than our parents, and the generation that comes after us has the opportunity to be smarter than us because you build on the shoulders of giants. And to, you know, when we were having these discussions, we would have discussions about climate change in, like, you know, the year 2004, and we all kind of took it at face value, I think. And we were like, man, I can't wait till we at least get this issue sorted. We can start working on something else. We just stalled. Not only we stalled, we started moving backwards a little bit. Flat Earth is like a real thing. We were all getting vaccinated back in the day. I remember, and this is like the kind of thing. It's a horror story if you're anti-vax, I'm sure. But you know, they'd take all of us in our class. You know, 30 years old, or not 30 years old. 30 kids is what I mean to say. In like 2nd grade. They'd put on Winnie the Pooh, and then one by one, they'd call us. We'd go to, like, the health room. We didn't really have a nurse's office. We'd go to the health room, and then a nurse would, you know, stick us with a needle. We'd go back in the room and watch Winnie the Pooh. Guess how many people in my graduating class had measles, mumps, rubella, you know, hepatitis B, etc., etc.? As far as I know, 0. We never had to deal with a mumps outbreak. Nobody in our class had polio. It ruled, dude. Yeah, I've had the chicken pox. And I guess, I don't know, I haven't looked into it for a while. What's the scuttlebutt on the chicken pox? I know if you don't get it as a child, and you get it as an adult, it has the potential to be more dangerous. But also, if you have chicken pox as a child, like the shingles virus just lives inside of you for your entire life. So I don't know. See, I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm not a doctor, which is why I don't talk about this stuff on the regular, because I don't know anything. But anyway, I disagree. Yo, do your research, bro. And I'm not talking about the first 15 or 20 results on Google, okay? I'm not talking about what anyone with a doctor in front of their name says. I only take advice from people who sell their own proprietary brand of supplements on their Squarespace-enabled website. I guess it's tough, though, you know, because, like, at the end of the day, if someone is anti-vaccinations, they're coming at it, as this is going to sound so, like, bending over backwards to be compassionate, but I mean it. They're coming at it from a place of, like, wanting to, you know, protect their family. It's just unfortunate that there's no reason for them to be doing it in the first place, and then on top of that, it runs the risk of not only actually harming their family substantially more, but also, you know, on top of that, potentially harming other people's families. I don't want that. I think that's a non-controversial stand. That's my opinion on this subject, at least. Dude, I don't know. This is a real tough one, because coming back as Dark Judas would actually be really nice, but I'm willing to get GB Baby instead and be way, way happier about it. Haha. So my thinking is, you know, this Boneheart will be lost. My thinking right now is if I can at least stand here with, you know, Samson's chain. History quickly crashing through your veins, Samson's chain. I can at least hit the enemy, minimize my own risk of being hit, and hopefully not suffer too much until we enter this phase, and then at this phase, you know, we'll try, but this phase is all about just dodging. I didn't think I was going to be hit there, honestly. You gotta, you know, with 0.95 speed, you kind of just gotta pick your battles. Host Hat's doing us some great work. I was always, and I feel lucky in this, I suppose, in hindsight. My mom was like she was like too pro-vaccination. And in hindsight, at the time, I was like, man, my mom was a real worrywart. Now I'm like, dude, she was like an intellectual Valkyrie. But it would be like, you know, even at age 21, before I went to Korea, she was like, she called up my doctor and was like, you know, are there any infectious diseases in Korea that would necessitate a vaccination? And the doctor was like, I mean, your son's 21, he's invincible, literally nothing can harm him on planet Earth. But simultaneously, yeah, sure, you know, we can hook him up with a couple of needles if you're interested. And guess what? I didn't get malaria. I also didn't encounter like a single mosquito, but I mean, public health, it's like it's a big deal in Canada. I'm not saying it's not elsewhere, but I think I told a story about how, like, I feel the need to point out, if you've never been to or seen South Korea, it's a modern nation. You know, I don't know, I think depending on the era that you grew up, you might have the perception that it's, you know, pre-industrial, like exclusively, like, farming culture, which is not the case. Either that, or you know of it exclusively through K-pop, and you think it's like 100 years ahead of the rest of society. It's not. It's just a country. You know, it's a modern post-industrial country. So you know, I lived there, and it was normal for me to live there because you know, it was very accommodating, thankfully. Then when I came back to Canada, I donated blood, and in order to donate blood after having been in Asia, I had to go into a room with a nurse. And you already have to, if you've never donated blood and you're Canadian, you already have to go through some hoops, which is fine because we have had, you know, blood scandals. Not really in my lifetime, but, you know, in general. You know, you fill out a survey, or not a survey really, but a questionnaire that's like, hey, have you ever, you know, had blood poisoning and other various, you know, lifestyle habits. And then after you do that, you also interview with a nurse who goes like, hey, you know, you answer to these questions. Do you still stand by those answers? Blah, blah, blah. And then after that, they give you like two barcodes. One of them is use my blood. The other one is I was too embarrassed to say yes to your questions, but please don't use my blood. It might be tainted. And then after that, they test it. Anyway, you get the idea. But I had to go into a room with a nurse, and she pulled out like a map of South Korea and was like, were you ever in any of these areas? And it was like, you know, farmland in between Seoul and Daejeon. And I was like, no. She's like, have you ever encountered insects in South Korea? I was like, honestly, probably. What kind? I'm like, I don't know. Am I okay? And then after like 45 minutes, they were like, yeah, you can donate blood. So, oh, thank you. I really appreciate you doing me this. You're really doing me a solid today. I understand they got to do their own work, but it was just, from my standpoint, it was overly precautionary. But again, what do I know? The other thing is, you know, you can start donating blood when you're like 16. And I don't want to get into the, again, whether there's discriminatory elements to this or not, because I have no idea. You know, I'm very ignorant, just in general, but particularly to this. But, you know, I started donating blood when I was 16 or 17 because my parents did it. And, you know, I was like, you know, it's an easy way to be helpful, to be, to give back to the community, right? So, and plus, especially if you're not even, like, slightly perturbed by needles, which I'm not, it really is not a big deal at all. They kind of stick you, and then they go squeeze on this ball and watch an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. We're going to win this run. It's kind of amazing. But it's really weird to be 17 years old, and then you go into a room, you know, with a healthcare professional, and they go, have you ever had an intimate relationship with a man between the years 1975 and today who lived in West Africa for 1 or more years between the period of 1985 to 1995. And you go, I mean, trust me, I was able to confidently say no because I hadn't had an intimate relationship with anybody. You can just toss down an X into the column for every single one of those questions. But simultaneously, you have to treat the situation with decorum, but also you're like, I really want to laugh at the question. Not because the question is implicitly funny, and I understand why you're asking, but you have to understand, you know, I'm in the 11th grade. I'm sure eventually they'll get a yes, and it'll justify the whole existence of the question in the first place. But at the time, I'm like, yo, you're barking up the wrong tree. First off, let me check out the passport sticker pages for everybody I've ever met in my entire life. I gotta make some phone calls, but anyway, we're done. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. I can't believe you won. If you enjoyed it, click the like button. Helps out a great deal. Of course, subscribe if you want to see more in the future. For now, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. See ya.